Today we need to cover the basics of 9th edition MLA. Alright, specifically 9th edition. MLA has put out enough editions, we need to be very specific now. Alright, so we're going to start with your Works Cited page. First of all, you need to call it Works Cited. This is a page where you give us the information about all the sources that you use in your paper, or presentation as it might be. Please keep in mind that MLA is boring, in the sense that you do not need to underline this, you do not need to make it a different size font, and you don't need to bold it. You just need to very plainly say, Works Cited at the top of the page. It's not references, it's not bibliography. Those words belong to different styles of documentation. Alright, this is a capital W, and this is a capital C. Alright, and it should be centered. You know, I can't recreate MLA super well on a teeny tiny whiteboard, but everything that I put up here is double spaced in your paper, even though I can't visually do that very well. Alright, so I want to start with the two most common types of scholarly sources you would be using. And we do want you using scholarly sources in your research papers. The first one is how to cite a book. So I'm going to write, book. Let's be clear about what we're doing. You need to start with the author's name, always. Regardless of what you're citing, if there is an author, the author's name comes first. And you always begin with the author's surname. I'm going to be specific and say surname, because which name is listed first and second depends on which language you are speaking. I'll make a point about that in a second. So, this example, by the way, is coming from Purdue's Online Writing Center, Purdue's OWL, and I do want you to check out Purdue's website and look at other examples that I won't be covering today, because there are many, many different things to cite in MLA, much more than what I will cover. Alright, so book. Author's surname comes first. So, Henley, in this case, comma, you need the comma. Punctuation in all documentation styles matters. I know it seems really nitpicky. I'm not gonna lie, it is nitpicky. But this is a documentation style that we have standardized over the course of many decades, so that anyone who looks at a references, works cited, or bibliography page can read it quickly and easily and understand what it's saying. This is so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time you write a paper. And then we can always understand what you mean. We don't have to stop and try to figure out what your personal, style is, because you might be very idiosyncratic about it. Alright, so surname, and then first name. I don't have a lot of board space, so this is going to look really weird. Alright. You are, in your document, going to allow your word processing program to wrap the text, but on the second, third, fourth, fifth lines of the entry, however many lines it takes to complete an entry, you need to tab over. So this one, over here, the H is on the margin. The next line of your entry is tabbed over 5 spaces. It's called a hanging indent. Alright, so this book is called The Hummingbird. House. Alright? All names of books, journals, newspapers, magazines, and entire websites, as well as the names of albums and television series and movies, are all underlined or italicized in MLA. So, obviously a word processing program can give you the italics. I can't, so I'm using an underline. In the publishing industry, it used to be true when we were only using typewriters that you underlined something that you wanted the publisher to turn into italics for you later, because all you had on your typewriter was the underline key. You didn't have an italics key. Alright, so this means italicize, the name of the novel, and you are capitalizing all major words in the title, plus the at the beginning. Alright, there's a period at the end of all containers. That's what they're calling it, a container, the major source of information here, period. Then the name of the publisher goes next. So this publishing house is named McMurray. After the publisher's name, you need a comma, and then the year of publication. So in this case, that would be 1999. Period. Always end your entry with a period. Alright, so a few things to note really quick. Reminder, this is on the margin of the page, and each line after that is tabbed over 5 spaces with a hanging indent. Always remember your punctuation, period, 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 and in this case, comma. Comma here. Okay. Another thing I cannot recreate for you using these entries is that the Works Cited page should be alphabetized by the first letter of the author's surname. So in this case, this would go under H. The next entry that I use won't be in alphabetical order, so I just have to tell you that manually. If the author is from Japan, China, North or South Korea, in other words, from a place in Asia where the surname is always listed first, you would not need a comma, because they're not separating their names by commas that way. That's just the normal order they go in. So, on occasion, you will run into someone whose name, by necessity of their language, would not require that comma. But if you're sticking to, just scholars here in the United States, people who were born in the United States with names like Patricia Henley, obviously you need your comma. Alright, next I'm going to cover a journal, a scholarly journal. Scholarly journals are different than magazines or newspapers. Journals only have articles written by people who have terminal degrees. I know that sounds really creepy, but by terminal we mean the final degree in their area. So they have a PhD, if they're a doctor, they have an MD, whatever the highest degree in their area is. These are the people publishing in journals. So you are looking at the scholarly work of scholars, and that's very different from a magazine. Someone who's writing for a magazine is going to have a degree in journalism, and they might be writing about any topic under the sun depending on what they've been assigned. It's not the same thing. These people are scholars in their area, and that's why we want them using them in your papers. This is a very good source of information for a scholarly argument. Scholars for scholarly arguments. Alright, so a journal. Okay. So, this person's surname is Bagchi, comma, because this is not an East Asian name. Let me make sure I spell his name right, or her name, as the case might be. So, Alak Nanda. Alright, surname, comma, personal name, period. Next comes the name of the article in the journal. So again, not having a lot of board space to get this done. Conflicting nationalisms. I'm going to stop here. The long title that I'm not going to write up here because of board space is Conflicting Nationalisms, because there's a subtitle, the voice of the subaltern in a specific person's work. Okay? But I'm just going to shorten it for board space. Please note punctuation. All articles, whether they're journal articles, newspaper articles, or magazine articles, have quotation marks around them, and the period goes inside of the quotation mark. Alright, then comes the name of the journal. I'm going to shorten again. I'm going to shorten this title to Tulsa Studies. It's Tulsa Studies in Women's Literature. It is italicized because it is the name of a journal, and therefore the name of a container, after which you need a comma. Journals have volume and issue numbers that you need to keep track of. So you say VOL period for volume. The volume number in this case is 15. Comma. The issue number, you're going to use NO for number. So this is issue number 1 in this case. Comma. Now you need the year that this issue of this volume was published. So it's 1996, in this case, comma. And then finally, the page numbers where this article can be found in this journal. Now, if you are in a good database, you will have a PDF file of the original pages from the journal, and you will see the page numbers in the corner of the scan that they made the PDF from, okay? So that's PP for page numbers, PP, and then 41 to 50 in this particular case. If the journal is a paper journal that you are holding in your hand like a magazine and reading, you're done. You can stop here. All right, so again, things I need to point out. Don't forget your punctuation. Period goes on the inside of the quotation marks. Everything else is a comma until you get to the very end, and then you have your period. All of this information, the volume and issue number, the year, the page numbers, should be in a database if you were looking in a database. Some databases would just say 41 and just tell you the first page of the article, and then they would say, for example, 13 pages or whatever. That means you're going to have to figure out what the final page is by doing some head math, all right? Or open the PDF and scroll to the end and see the final page number. Don't say 41 and stop. You're lying. Don't lie to your readers. It's not a one-page long article. Okay. What happens if this is in a database? And it probably is. Most of you are probably now getting your journal articles from databases. You need to add extra information. So I'm going to put the page numbers back up here of that article. Let's see, 41 to 50. So pretend like the rest of the entry is still above it. Again, space constraints. Next, after this, comes the name of your database. All right. In this case, we're going with ProQuest, although I am pulling this off of a different entry to make my point. ProQuest is the name of a database, so it gets italicized. All right, comma. After this, most professors will probably want you to either give the stable URL, which you should be able to find in the entry on the database, either the stable URL or the DOI. All right. In this case, this entry has a DOI on it. So, Digital Object Identifier, I believe is what it stands for. It tells you how to get to this article with a stable URL. In other words, a URL that you can always get to, because databases will generate temporary URLs based on your search that you did. You want the one that's stable. So DOI works, and then it's usually some very long number, sometimes with some letters thrown in. Very long. Don't forget your period at the end. All right. In other words, anytime you're in a database, whether it's an ebook collection or whether it is journal articles, whenever you get done with the page numbers or whatever's at the end of the entry, then you add database, again, don't forget your comma, and either the stable URL or the DOI, which in this case has a colon. Always end with a period. All right, so this is a super, super basic overview of the two main scholarly sources you would be using in your paper in MLA style.